very good morning and welcome to Media Monitor, the show that monitors and evaluates media coverage of leading stories of the week and puts the media in the spotlight. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. We're live right here on Channel 404. That's SABC News for all local and all global news. In our lineup today, we start by discussing today's newspaper headlines, the coverage of the Nkandla ad hoc committee. We have a follow-up on the collapse at dormitory of TB Joshua's church in Nigeria and the Pretoria church video that circulated of its congregates drinking petrol. We also analyze the Kuruman education saga. And lastly, we take a look at the media coverage of the Ebola outbreak. Now, to give us analysis on the coverage of these stories, let's welcome Ms. Nozintombi Mia, SABC journalist, Dr. Ilva Rodney Gumede, who is the head of journalism, film and television at the University of Johannesburg, Mr. Matthew Wade, who is the head of research at Media Tenor. Remember, you can call us to give us insight on the stories that you think deserve to be covered by the media, but were omitted on the following numbers: +27 if you're outside the country, 11-714-6847, 714-6843, 714-6857. You can share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, and of course like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. A very, very good morning to you. All right, now, as tradition, before we go into discussion with the stories that made headlines throughout the week, let's first take a look at today's newspaper headlines panel. A very good morning to you. You're looking very good today. Let's start with you, Matthew, amongst the ladies. What's making news headlines for you?
I'm quite interested by the Sunday Independent story, the lead story there on Zuma's probe into Piecha, and I think it's interesting, you know, what we're going to potentially see here is a third police commissioner in a row who could potentially leave under a cloud, and I think it's sort of perhaps raises questions about the process we go through in appointing these commissioners. And it's been interesting, the media, sort of since Celebi's corruption trial and everything, the media has been very quick to pick up on any potential wrongdoings by police commissioners, and they're under a microscope these days. It's very interesting.
All right, it's a very interesting story indeed. Nozintombi, I know, was commenting about it again.
Yes,
Nozintombi, what's your view on that story making headlines on Sunday?
Well, you know, I certainly agree with you, Matthew, that the probe of Ria Piecha will be very interesting, especially considering her role in the Marikana tragedy that happened in 2012. So I think we'll get some answers from this particular probe.
Doctor, what's making news headlines for you today?
No, absolutely. Piecha story, long overdue, I would say. A probe into. I also think that we have a couple of interesting stories. We are continuing the Nkandla Gate story, of course, as we should. And I think also we have someone has picked up on the water shortage and done a fair dissection of what's happening there, and some deadlines maybe for when we can see some resolve.
All right, but what do you think wasn't covered in the media? We were really begging for all the newspapers last week to cover in depth on, of course, the crime statistics. Nobody has done that. How do you feel about that, Nozintombi?
Well, I think the crime statistics and the coverage of it is a very contentious one. And amid a very hectic news week, how do you make the decision of how much space to give the crime statistics when we've had over 80 people dying in Lagos, when we have a water crisis, and we have an Nkandla situation where we need to see some sort of resolution in our parliament, and we're seeing all sorts of ups and downs in our parliamentary sittings, etc. You know, how do you measure how much space do you give to the crime statistics and the issues around that?
Do you agree, Doctor?
I agree, but at the same time, I think that the media could have done a little bit more following up on the story. Also, the build-up to the story could have been better covered, I think.
How so?
I think that there are issues there. I mean, firstly, if you look at statistics is something that isn't made overnight. This is a story that media could have been on for a much longer time, to be honest. And I mean, crime statistics is something that we've been promised for a very, very long time.
Yes.
Lowered. You know, we haven't seen that, so that's something to query.
Matthew, in terms of research, are people happy with what has been, summarized in terms of statistics so far? We're clearly in the dark still.
No, we've seen a lot of reaction regarding the crime stats, and it's not just reaction to being upset with what the stats say or whatever. There's also question marks over how the statistics are compiled. And I know there's a lot of people who would like to see statistics released more regularly, because I think there is certainly an argument to be made for the fact that only having a look at it once a year makes it very difficult to have a strategic reaction. You know, you're just sort of doing it for the headlines. And then there's also question marks over whether it's actually accurate, particularly around sexual crimes and that kind of thing. There's a lot of question marks over whether we are getting the full picture of those numbers. So there's a lot of controversy around here, and I think it probably would have been nice to see some more of the media sort of really digging into these statistics and seeing what they really mean.
I'm very concerned because, I mean, crime stats, they affect us directly. We need to know what's going on in the country. And to shelve that story and put it on page 5, and still not give it enough analysis, it's not enough.
I agree with you, Alicia, but my question to both of you as professionals is how do you weigh how much of that, the issue of the crime statistics, do you put on your front page when 84 South Africans have died in Lagos? How do you measure that exactly?
Well, it's not a quid pro quo how many people die in one set of stats vis-a-vis the others. It's a big story, of course. That does not mean that you can't cover both stories.
Absolutely.
So,
but how much weight do you put on either story?
I'm not going to sit here and give you any percentages.
We should be asking you. You should be answering those questions in actual retrospect. All right, we're going to leave it there on the newspapers because we're going to go into a huge debate here. Let's go on to our top story today. Opposition members of parliament walked out of the Nkandla ad hoc committee on Friday after the ruling party refused to agree to call the president to answer questions and follow public protector's instructions to repay a portion of the money spent on his Nkandla home. The ANC responded that the walkout is a sign of bad faith. Let's take a look at this insert.
When we went into this process, did we expect a different outcome? Yes, absolutely so. Why? Because it's obvious. If we take the Constitution serious, if Parliament wants to be taken serious, we have to fulfill that role and that obligation.
We'll be referring this question of the constitutional power of the public protector to the Constitutional Court in order that a ruling will be taken that we simply cannot equate the public protector to the same as any order that can be given by an arm of the executive.
A political stand, when it's taken, that should not be confused to be meaning we don't want to work, we want to hold Parliament at ransom, and we want Parliament to be dysfunctional.
I want to assure you that there is no need for anyone to be suspicious of the work that is going to be done by the ANC members in that committee.
All right, let's welcome on the line Mr. Ralph Mateja to give us some insight into the ad hoc committee. Ralph, a very good morning to you and thank you for joining us on Media Monitor.
Good morning, Alicia, and good morning to your guest in studio.
Ralph, now that the MPs have walked out of the ad hoc committee, what significance does this committee hold without the opposition? Has media ventured into this?
Well, without the opposition, the committee just lacks legitimacy because it is supposed to be constituted by multi-parties and there has to be a consensus on a way forward regarding how to deal with the Nkandla report. So by walking out, what the opposition are saying is that they are not going to legitimize what is happening within the committee. So that takes away the legitimacy of the committee and it brings to standstill the issue on Nkandla and how to deal with this. And another point about this is that at the center of this, it's a severe sense of mistrust across political parties, particularly between the ANC and the opposition parties on this. And with this level of mistrust, it's going to be very difficult for the committee to expedite its responsibilities on this issue on Nkandla.
Now, Ralph, what more can we expect from the opposition? I mean, they talked about taking the matter to the Constitutional Court, another possible media frenzy.
It is also an indictment on Parliament as well, because when issues within Parliament are taken to the court, we should also note that Parliament is supposed to be quite work on its own space. It does not require the court to keep on telling it how to go about its responsibilities. So when you see Parliament that seems to be constantly wanting to defer to court, it is quite an indictment on the legislature. It actually says that Parliament is not really constituted by the brilliant minds that are capable of finding that consensus. And I think we would like to see more on that, on what's going to happen. And also taking this issue to court, it has to be very clear. What is it that is being taken to court? I didn't find that breakout being done very well in the media. I mean, there is a question about the powers of the public protector, but there's also a question about the actual merit of the public protector's report. And I think that clarification has not been properly made. If they go to court and they want to talk about the powers of the public protector, I think the powers of the public protector are well outlined in the Constitution. I think what is at issue here, it is the actual merit of the public protector's report, which is actually reviewable. That is the merit of the remedies that she has actually proposed in that report relating to Mkanga expenditure.
Please stay on the line. I really want to further discuss this. I just want to get back to my panel. Panel, he's just mentioned it. I think the very big issue here is the questions around the public protector's words, recommendations versus, of course, what people term as direct instructions. I'm just as confused. Where is the media to clarify what the squabble is all about? Nuzintombi.
I think it's very difficult for us really to give clarity on issues such as remedial action. You remember in the Constitution, it does explain the scope of the public protector's work, and it says she does have the option to take remedial action against whomever it is that she's investigating. And I think we need to go back to Parliament, to people who dealt with the issues of the Constitution, to explain exactly what they meant by the issue of remedial. Remedial as in punitive, or remedial as in we're looking to rectify a situation that has gone awry.
Very interesting that it's come this far and you still don't have it. Doctor, please explain to us.
No, I think it's interesting because what we see here is also the sort of how misunderstood the constitutional protection is of the public protector's office, actually by the ruling party. And I think that the fact that we have seen accusations during the week saying, you know, in and around the commission and the report that was released on Nkandla by the public protector, that the report and the remedial actions aren't covered by the Constitution. That's absolute nonsense, and it needs to be told that it's absolute nonsense, you know. So I think that there are a lot of those things to explain to people properly, as you say.
Matthew?
I think part of the challenge is that having this debate in a parliamentary committee is always going to be fraught with the situation that the ANC holds such a majority that you're not really going to get any clear answer one way or the other regarding the position of the public protector. And I think what the opposition parties are saying about perhaps taking it to court and having the courts decide on what's the right way forward, it may end up being what we need to do, because I don't think we're going to get a clear indication from Parliament one way or the other.
All right. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much to Ralph Mateja, independent political and media analyst, joining us on the line to shed some more insight. Well, we're going to take a very quick ad break, and when we return, we continue to discuss the coverage of the TB Joshua collapse building. Join the conversation by calling us on +2 711 714 6843, 714 6847, 714 6857, and let us know which stories anywhere you are you feel were not adequately covered by the media. Share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, and of course, like our Facebook page, Media Monitor. Don't go anywhere.
You can't have a gut feeling about other people's gut feeling.
Ngaba has continued the tradition of passing stories onto the next generation, using a platform that offers stories to a far more greater audience.
Zombie no go unless you tell them to go.
This is what the audiences all over the world knew Fela Kuti for.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Watching Media Monitor, welcome back. You can still be part of our discussion by calling and tweeting us. You can also ask your questions via our Twitter account at SA Media Monitor and direct them to my panel. We also want to hear your views on our topic, so do give us a call. In our next story, Prophet TB Joshua's church building collapse in Lagos has shone a spotlight on the so-called charismatic churches. The latest incident of Pastor Lesego Daniel claimed he could turn petrol into pineapple juice. Let's take a look at this insert.
There are 115 deceased in this tragedy, and 84 of that 115 are South Africans. So we still have a long time to go.
My wife also died under that, and we was lying not far apart from one another. Her last words to me was, keep on praying. This man is the most humblest person I can say it for myself, in the world. And the teachings is quite simple for you to understand. There's no pressure, it's a free world thing altogether. And this is what we get from him. His preachings, his teachings, everything is perfect.
Quickly.
Pineapple juice.
The word is upon it. How is it? How is it? Is it nice? Is it nice? Huh? Is it nice? Oh, men of God, you want to taste?
Very interesting. All right, let's take our first caller, Mkolisi from Nelspruit. A very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Your comment, please, sir.
Hi, how are you, Alicia?
We're very well, thank you, Mkolisi. Please go ahead.
Very well. I must say that I followed the ad hoc committee with keen interest. Remember that there was a proposal some other time in Parliament that we should establish a portfolio committee that will be holding the president and the deputy president accountable. And that view has been rejected vehemently in the past. And now the ANC went to that particular committee with one purpose. And that purpose was to ensure that the president does not get to come to present his view. Remember that he did not answer questions from the public protector, he did not answer questions from SIU. So I don't find it very necessary for the ANC not to accept that the president must come to account. And this, by the way, was a test of our separation of power. Remember that the ANC has just pronounced that the president must be protected, must use his imbizos to account, and his imbizos can never be an appropriate way of accountability, because there's a system of accountability in South Africa, and Parliament is it.
Thank you so much. That's Mkolisi calling us all the way from Nelspruit, talking to us about the ad hoc committee. All right, now, panel, let's move on to our next story. Looking at that insert, what are your views as a journalist, Nozindom?
As a journalist, it certainly is an interesting story to cover, because I think people would want to see what happens in those churches and to find out what people's reactions are. It's a very colorful story. I'm not talking about the ethics of it or the morality of drinking petrol and turning it into pineapple juice. But it certainly is a very interesting story.
I just want to know, panel, how did that story find its way into the tragedy that happened in Lagos? That is a tragic story. How did that find its way onto the wings of the story now? Matthew?
Well, I think people are making the association, and the media as well, making that association between TB Joshua and his charismatic church and the charismatic churches that we have here in South Africa. And I think this is nothing new. The religious leaders throughout history have been, well, certainly in the last few hundred years, have been very closely monitored by the media. Since newspapers emerged, religious leaders have been tackled because the position they hold, we sometimes forget these are people and they're subject to the same temptations, the same flaws as everybody else, but they profess to represent something better. And I think that's part of the reason why the media are so quick to jump on any perceived sort of wrong by them. And that something as sort of sensational as turning petrol into pineapple juice, that obviously it's bound to attract attention, particularly because it would be so hard to prove that that's what he's really done. And I think the media are quite keen to try and sort of make us all question, what are these people promising and what are we buying into?
No, but shouldn't they have investigated how so many of these churches have actually thrived in South Africa in the first place, Doctor?
Absolutely, and I think that the media has a huge responsibility on such a story, actually. I mean, we can never deny people the right to association with any church or any convention, and in times of uncertainty, people are drawn into these charismatic churches and church leaders. But the amount of money that is amassed amassed by some of these church leaders and some of these churches. The shenanigans then that we see are these kind of things. But on a daily basis, people can come under such spells, and I think that this is something. This is a good story, and it has a bearing for people's life, more people than we think.
But shouldn't then media be highlighting or even reporting on the demographics of this church as well, Nozintombi? We know that media has been, we've seen at the airport, they've only been covering the people that have been able to get themselves to OR Tambo. What about the families that are back in the Eastern Cape and they have no way of getting to fetch their loved ones?
You know, I think as somebody who has followed the story, you see that it's about hope. In the economy that we're in the fact that a lot of people don't have jobs, people will cling to the hope of something. And charismatic churches do give them that hope, regardless of whether or not it seems sound or it does make any sense or whatnot. And it really does become difficult as the media to cover issues that break the hope of people who are absolutely desperate. And most of their family members were not even aware that they had gone to Nigeria to TB Joshua's church, because there seems to be a lot of secrecy behind people following charismatic churches and drinking petrol, because at the back of their minds there is a level of, this is a certain level of ridiculous, but when you're faced with utter despair and hopelessness, you will do anything to get to that point. So there does seem to be a level of secrecy, and it is very difficult for us as the media to get into it and try and get people's true feelings on what's going on.
We'll expand more on that point, Nozintombi. Let's take Kamwale from Namibia. Kamwale, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us, sir. Please go ahead with your comment.
Good morning, Alicia. How are you doing?
We're very well, thank you, sir. Please go ahead.
Good. I just want to talk about the story at Lagos that people in the building corrupts.
Go ahead, come on.
I don't understand why these things is a problem to many people. You cannot blame someone if the accident is happening, but that so-called process might be something is also need to be looked at. As he said, the building was corrupt because there was an aeroplane on top of it, but other stories saying they are busy constructing some of the other building on top of it. So maybe something needs to be done that. And I also want to add something at the Ebola.
Yes.
When I'm feeling that I always came in South Africa so many times. But when you are taking people who are coming in that country, in South Africa, you don't need only to check people from those countries that are affected in that West Africa. There can be like someone from that West Africa to the other country that is not affected, and from there to South Africa. When you do a screening, you do a screening for everyone from everywhere.
All right, thank you so much. That's Kambwale all the way in Namibia calling us there. Now, Nozintombi, you mentioned a very interesting point there, that it's people that are desperate. Why isn't media then, highlighting or doing an expose on about gullibility and what people should really be looking out for when something is too good to be true? Matthew?
Well, I think that perhaps the charismatic churches it's a difficult issue for the media to examine. If you look at other sectors where the media can examine, if someone's a doctor and they're doing a bad job and they're making false claims, there's a medical body that's overseeing the doctors, and the media have that to and fro. They can go to the doctor, they can go to the experts in the field. But for these charismatic churches, there is no overarching body that's checking on these claims and providing some sort of, this is a genuine thing and these guys are just chances. So the media sort of have to play the role not only of reporting, but also, in a sense, making judgment on whether these guys are just trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. So it's a very difficult position for the media, because obviously they're supposed to be as objective as possible, but at the same time, sometimes these stories require a little bit of a verdict, in a sense.
There's Matthew taking Nozintombi's side. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to leave it there for now, and when we return, we're going to look at the media coverage of the Kurumani Learners saga. You can still be part of our discussion by expressing your views as to which stories you think should have been covered by the media by calling us on the following numbers: +2711 714 6843, 714 6847, 714 6857. Share your views and comments on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, and of course our Facebook page. Stay with us. This is Media Monitor.
Zoom into Africa. This is Eritrea. The president is Mr. Isaias Afewerki. Eritrea got independent from Ethiopia on 24th May in 1993. The population is over 5 million people. One of the major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit is the Nakfa.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. You can be part of our discussion by calling us on the numbers that will appear at the bottom of your screens, or contact us on Facebook as well as on Twitter. In our next story, the Northern Cape Department of Basic Education has deregistered all Kuruman matriculants who were due to sit for their final exams next month. Now, this follows a violent community strike that disrupted classes for almost 4 months. Let's take a look at this insert compiled by one of our producers, Yolanda Mhlat.
Ingru community group, known as the Local Road Forum, vowed that no learners will attend classes until their demand of third road was met.
I do not have much regret on that matter because the parents of the same student are the parents who closes the schools.
The strike affected more than 17,000 learners.
Whilst we are fighting other battles, can we then allow the future of our nation to continue?
The matrics will, however, be allowed to sit for the supplementary exams beginning of next year, but learners starting from grade R to 11 will have to repeat their grades next year.
All right, now, before we get into that discussion, let's take Pastor Richard from Kempton Park. Pastor, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Your comment, please.
Good morning to your panel as well. How are you, ma'am?
We're very well, thank you, Pastor. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just want to put the position of the church concerning this petrol issue or this pastor in Pretoria.
Go ahead, Pastor.
You see, the position of the church is that even if we can go back to the beginning of the church, when the people were in trouble, the Israelites were in trouble in Egypt, God wanted or brought Moses, who had a solution from God, to come and assist his people concerning the problems they were facing. And that is the purpose of the church. So now, which means whenever there's a problem, the pastor is, or the church is empowered to help the people in that community. Now, with what is happening with this man, I think he is risking the lives of people. Because even Jesus Christ, he was tempted to turn the stones into bread, but he refused, because what is the purpose of it? The purpose of the church is to help, nothing else. This guy is taking a risk. I think personally he needs to be arrested or be questioned.
Thank you so much there, Pastor, for your input. Very interesting view. What do you want to say, Nozintombi, very quickly?
I'm really surprised that a pastor has come out against a fellow pastor. And I think that's what we need. We need moral judgment. We need our pastors to stand up and say, this is wrong.
Thank you very much, the panel. A lot of people were saying last week as well that it seems that TB Joshua hasn't come out to take any part of the responsibility, and that's what the families want, is some responsibility from him. But let's move on now. Let's talk about Kuruman saga. This is an extremely important story, yet I feel... What do you think?
Well, this is a story that I actually follow. It's quite a big one for me. My wife is a teacher, and for me, the right to education and a forum looking for roads. I think that it's completely unethical and immoral. And I think part of the problem here is that our protests around South Africa have become so violent of headlines. It's not getting the kind of attention that the protests where people are actually hurt are. And as a result, it's sort of been allowed to sort of skip under the radar. I mean, these kids who are who should be
to return to school next year because they've had a taste of money. No, Zintombi?
Undoubtedly, you're quite right there, Matthew. We have not covered the story sufficient. The problem in those areas are.
Doctor, how does this affect you? You work with pupils.
Yeah, no, but we talked about this before, and very glad that the SABC, we need to listen to the students, we need to listen to their concerns. And I mean, it's the same with protest deliveries all over. But these are students who are desperate, who are no other means.
in particular have become very political, and they really do focus far more on the big political questions than they do on issues on the ground, issues in schools. And I think that the media
was going to fight for us. They went there for us. They never went for Zuma or for anybody. They went for us.
Thank you so much.
It should be parliamentarians. It should be, we're South Africa. As citizens, as a society, we need to be working together to better our country.
All right, and then
SABC. sharing 20.
Welcome back to our final segment right here on Media Monitor, and you can still be part of our discussion by contacting us on the numbers that will appear at the bottom of your screens. Not
let the ANC not protect such an immoral issue. Money was wastefully spent. Let the president come and answer the questions.
actually doing.
Well, you know, it should be quite simple to find out, actually, you know, because this is an organization that communicates quite well. Media, you know, around the world. So
do from outside of the region in terms of tackling the virus, or are we so focused on preventing the virus from coming here that we're sort of putting walls and saying, you guys...
And that now must be a little bit kept under the carpet. We cannot have that kind of a situation, because if you are allow the country that kind of thing.
And we have the Hansard records where we can go back to if needed, you know. So I think that there are a lot of reactive reporting maybe that needs to be. More proactive and more. What I would like to see is actually a follow-up on the water story and the water shortage. And I think it is important, and I think we need to start querying